They shouldn't really try so hard to catch a firefly. I think Claire should say, let's just stand still.
Yeah, well, then that got into the music and the little when the firefly is coming into the jar.
Right.
I think our first inspiration or our intention was to write, a very honest story about love and life and relationship, which is essentially like also a boy meets a girl story. We want it to be like a classic love story without any like hidden gimmicks or something.
Because when you pitched it to me, we had just come off of writing Bungee Jump, which did deal with relationships.
Right.
But I think there was a certain feeling that you wanted to go deeper. You had just lost someone in your life. You'd just gotten out of a relationship.
Right.
You wanted to go deeper, but also felt that writing about these things directly end up being just familiar, saccharine, cliche. Also, not to put words in your mouth, but I remember you were saying that the way we were living at that point, we all were becoming kind of cynical and jaded as people and sort of forgetting what was exciting about life or connection or what's worth taking the risk of leaving your room for.
Mhm.
And that if we write these about robots who are actually like kind of fresh to the world, like they only just got created like a few years ago, that they're going to be bringing to life a certain type of engagement that like we don't have. And that's why it was more exciting. It would give us more opportunity to write about these things.
Yeah, in a way, even more directly.
Right.
Because if it was just two human protagonists, then if they were dishonest or something, then I don't know. I would have been like, as an audience member, I would be like, what's the catch? Like, what are they hiding? Like they cannot be that innocent, right? But there should be a twist. Like that's what we are so used to these days. Also, there's that aesthetical reason too. We want it to be a little more, at least in the beginning, a little more like somber and calm, not necessarily always really belting out their emotions. So if they are robust, then it makes more sense, and it give us so like a freedom to explore those thematic stuff in a more different style. That was one of the reasons, I think.
A lot of the taste in movies that you shared with me were movies that didn't state everything directly. It was all through sort of the careful choice of details that sort of accrue and sort of hint at or obliquely portray a situation. And so this was, I think, the taste that you sort of, brought to me originally, or like things like Marimo, the dog. It's a little YouTube video.
Oh my God.
So a Japanese short film about a dog. It's just about someone who adopts a puppy, the puppy grows up and dies. Now, how do you actually make that not just like, okay, we get it, the puppy, right? But they had chosen all the right details that made it like the ultimate tearjerker. And I was like, I don't want to watch a little video about a puppy, but I was like sobbing. And I think this was part of the thing that we were going for here, is that, okay, we won't have like gigantic big events. It'll essentially just be relationships, like start to finish. But if we put the right details in the right order and bring the right thing back at the right time and allude to this thing here that kind of calls back that thing, that somehow all through implication, it might end up having a kind of emotional weight that we couldn't get when we were just directly hitting everything on the nose with like a very, like you said, pyrotechnic plot. And that was like that, what was that Japanese director?
You're probably talking about Shunji Wai, who wrote and directed Love Letter. But even Marimo, it's a short film, like 10-minute long short film. Spoiler alert. But first half of it is in the perspective of the owner who just lost her dog. And then it makes you think that the movie is ending there. But then the second half starts in the perspective of the dog from the very beginning to the end.
It's so cute.
And yeah, that's actually interesting that you just mentioned it, because just like putting the character in a slightly different perspective, you all of a sudden get to talk about kind of like a mundane story, very familiar story, but with a different I don't know, like sensibility, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we were excited about the possibility of the story that we are using robots as our protagonists in that way, if that makes sense.
The plant that Oliver holds, the firefly in the jar, the paper cup foams. But these were all visual images that Hugh suggested very early in the process as sort of like freighted with emotional meaning. Like, you were like loneliness. What do I think of loneliness? I think of sitting in a room alone with my plant. I think because you were sitting alone in your room with your plant. And then when you think of like the magic of the natural world, the idea that a single bug can like light up a jar, you were like jar with a firefly. And then like communication is really difficult. 2 paper cup foams connected by a wire. All of the themes were embodied in objects and images. And I attribute that to just that you're a graphic designer and a visual artist.
Oh, thank you. But I mean, it was always teamwork. I don't think I came up with those images, or icons, entirely by myself. We were just like talking about the scenes, and then we're coming up with those ideas together. And then things like the paper cup phone, that is, because we probably talked about it a long time ago, but did you used to make that as a kid?
Sure.
Yeah, because it's like how to learn. Like anyway, so to me that's like so analog. I think that was the main reason that we were trying to come up with that kind of images. Not only that I studied visual arts, it was more like we were trying to find some meaningful, symbolic objects together. But there are things like that Claire tells Oliver as Oliver's like anxiously trying to like catch Highfly. She goes saying, "Oh, just stand still."
It's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor that's really hard to explain to the actors. So yeah, right? Because I feel like I never nailed actually articulating it. Actually, I got the idea from an interview. What was his name? A singer-songwriter that I used to listen to a lot, Ray LaMontagne. I think that's his name. I was on a treadmill at the gym.
Is this how you run on a trip?
Listening to All Songs Considered, which is NPR podcast that I like a lot, and they were playing his new album, and I don't remember the entire story anymore, but it took a while for him to come up with the new album, new songs, and they were talking about that he kind of like stopped trying to make new songs, and then there was and then he started to get all this inspiration. I don't know why, but they really resonated with me.
Yeah, I remember some things from early on, not only because I was researching the history of the show recently. I definitely remember that from at the very first reading he did with us afterwards, he said, "Do you think it would be exciting to split James and Gil, the jazz singer, into
Right.
2 different actors? Because in Korea, they were played by the same actor." The idea was that this actor kind of plays all the humans. So he plays Gil, but Michael said, if you divide them up, it'll allow you to get the most amazing, authentic singer, jazz singer to play Gil Brentley. And then it'll free you up to this other actor. You could add more of the backstory and scenes that in Korea, we would find ourselves at talkbacks, always sort of answering questions about the owners of the characters and what our backstories were. But a lot of that is only hinted at in earlier versions and in the Korean production, where a line here or a line there suggests something. But once we separated off the actors, we ended up putting a lot more into the actual piece on stage instead of it being only hinted at.
Yeah.
So that unlocked so much, that idea of separating them.
Yeah, that was Michael's. And to me, it was just even watching him working with the actors and, working with the designers and everyone. I was in awe watching Michael, like who, grew up actually always thinking about theater, and at a very, young age, like worked as an actor. By the way, who's still a brilliant actor. Just like how he, like interacts with the world, with the mindset of a theater maker, was always very refreshing and to me. And then like very fascinating.
He and the designers have created something that fills a Broadway theater and yet helps the story instead of interfering with the story, which I think often you think spectacle, one can slather spectacle all over something and actually bury a story. And in their case, I just feel like what Michael and the team have done enhances the story at every turn and gives you something that can fill a Broadway house and be spectacular and beautiful and emotional.
It is very weird, and especially when we get like letters from our fans, it just means so much, right? Also, it's like handwritten letters, and they talk about how the show emotionally impacted them. It's just surreal. I mean, I don't know. And I get really scared because I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Like, I'm not allowed to, I shouldn't really, affect other people this much. That's how I feel about it. So I feel so much responsibility at the same time, but it's weird. Yeah. How do you feel about it?
Well, I don't feel bad about it like you do. I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. No, it's incredible. I mean, whenever we encounter someone who has seen the show and liked the show, and especially like you said, if it's moved them emotionally in some way, it's incredible, because I think the big fear as a writer is you really put all your own emotion into it. Oh, you care so much about this, and then someone looks at it and is like, "That's what you cared about." Right? Like, it's very embarrassing, right? And that happens to writers all the time, right? You kind of put yourself out on the line, right? And so then when someone goes, "Oh, I feel the same way about that thing, that aspect of life or whatever." Hwabun is the pre-show in Korea. This is sort of funny to us that in America, James is on stage before the audience comes in, right? This was Michael's idea. In Korea, it's Hwabun who's alone on stage in a little shaft of light. So you could imagine Hwabun is reading and thinking his thoughts as you walk into the theater in Korea.
We would be working on the book together, right? So we would have been writing scenes and, refining the song moments. And then you would been expanding the fragments of the music sketches that you already, by the point, like
That's right.
shared with me. And then I would been working on the Korean lyrics.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what we do. And then so it becomes like a longer and longer and more complete songs. That's the
accurate. That's accurate. I often send him sketches with dummy lyrics. This is before we're making the treatment over here of the story. I'm making musical sketches that are in the world of the show, but not actually yet defined as like, what moment are they? So there was this song. Do you remember this? The lyric? So the lyric was, would you ever get over me? If we fell in love, if we fell in love, would you put on a show for me? If we fell in love, if we fell in love. So that was the original, but these dummy lyrics are not suggestions of lyrics. They're just babbling.
When you're a robot, you keep your books on a shelf. You're never lazy, you keep your hands to yourself. No one calls you by name, every day is the same when you're a robot.
And then that's actually very much like working as a lyricist in the pop world, because the composers or the producers always send out their demo to their lyricists with these kind of dummy lyrics. And then, yeah, so I was kind of used to, like setting wheels,
Right.
melodies.
Yeah, and the dummy lyrics they contain a little bit of information. For example, in that one, repeating the same phrase twice. If you fell in love, which we kept as like a structural thing.
I take out a pen and wash the paint away. You wouldn't stay.
I remember it,
I
yeah.
only wanted more. And what's so wrong with that? I'm old, it's true. But so are you.
Wow, I haven't listened to it in like a decade. That's amazing.
Yeah. But one thing I noticed that's interesting on this, my sketches for that song, When You're in Love, do have rhymes placed throughout it. And then we ended up making the avant-garde choice that I still am insecure about, to have this one song in the show that does not have structural rhymes. It is When You're in Love. And the idea being that in this moment, it's like the crucial moment when they come back from the trip. James is gone. Oliver realizes what he's been feeling. Claire has gotten over her belief that there's absolutely no point to ever get close to someone because she witnessed the record happening, all this stuff. So in this moment, we decided, no, it's this totally new experience. It should feel like nothing else in the show. There will be no structural rhymes. It'll just be a stream of consciousness.
Yeah, because we knew that the structure of the lyrics for the song was like the first verse is, them reciting all the negative, facts about love that they learned from the humans or Oliver learned from the songs that he listens to,
Right.
things like that. But then they cannot help themselves, keep thinking about
The actual thing they
Yeah.
experienced, right? And so then we thought, you know what, that structure is enough. That's already a structure. So we will have no rhymes in it. Of course, later then I got nervous. Once it came to Broadway, I was like, do we have to go back and put rhymes into that song? We were being very avant-garde, but no one has said anything about it. So
I don't think there are
I
any.
think we gotta win.
Yeah, I think it's a myth that there are rules. You know.
Whoa. I'm thinking, is there anything, because all these motory things were clearly inspired by certain like minimalist composers and, but
But then again, the playlist worked very well as so like a background music. So a lot of them actually on the playlist were film scores too.
right.
Yeah, songs from instrumental music from like films that we liked, and then sensibility wise, kind of like relevant
Yeah.
for us and for the show. So I can't really remember anything particular right now.
Here's something funny. This was not on our playlist, but there's the thing about the end of the Maybe Happy Ending song that we call the spaceship from E.T. taking off. Because there's this thing when it's going, that's not such an awful ending if we had to have an ending. And this to me is the end of each one. This sort of alternating of the and every time we got to there in band rehearsal, we'd say, okay, E.T.'s taking off. And then if the band messed up, we'd say E.T. didn't make it.
Will is the biggest fan of John Williams. So
That's true. I do love John Williams. That's why there's a little Easter egg. There's a piccolo solo. I mean, this is an Easter egg of no interest to anyone, but there's a little piccolo solo in the. And using piccolo in its low range was something I also learned from E.T. It's the first thing you hear in the movie is a very low piccolo playing. And I just thought, piccolo. They're usually playing a low piccolo. What a cool idea. So I ripped it off for the Firefly song. So these are some little nerdy things.
Was the Firefly sequence, has it ever changed? Has it always been the same instrument?
It's always been that. It's always been based on where you belong. That this was this thing where we thought, I don't know how many people notice that when they're watching the show. For us, it's where you belong is not James's theme. Where you belong is how Oliver felt while working for James.
He'll ask me how I spend the days. I'll tell him all the little ways I saved. He listens. He thanks me for the years I spent. He wishes that they never went away. He smiles.
It's that feeling is now James is gone, but actually that still exists. And now he's finding this with Claire and with, this adventure that they're on together. So we wanted to show that there was life after James, right? Do you have anything you want to say about it? It can't literally be a complete, true loop, only in that, Claire is progressively losing more of her battery power. Also, Oliver knows things that he didn't before. I mean, again, he could be acting differently. So I think to some extent it could be on a loop, but the loop is going to be a little different each time. It's not a pure loop. It's like a spiral. Well, for all we know, maybe they find some great solution to her battery. I don't know.
Well, that's optimistic of you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that, but maybe. What did we learn to be more optimistic, right? But what do you think, too?
I'm like very afraid of saying anything right now. Because I know how much people like to like
Speculate.
right, and I don't want to. I think it's beautiful that we just like leave it kind of open-ended that way, because that's very much what we wanted to say about life in general with the show. So like geeking out, giving our interpretation, it kind of ruins that poetic beauty of it, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I love that people are really enthusiastic about talking about it, but that's all.
But not
I don't have any 2 cents. I think whatever people think is the answer. Whatever you think is the answer. Yeah,
I agree.
That's how I feel about it, genuinely. Yeah.
Wow. There was definitely consciously an arc in how he interacts with the characters.
Right. He's a projection of
That's right, and that he becomes more and more involved with them. And musically, we did want to create a sense that only their last number together is, Then I Can Let You Go, has really a mix of a sort of, I don't know what you want to call it. The verses are not diegetic. They are the characters actually singing, Oliver and Claire, like the other songs in the musical, but then the bridge that Gil sings is like it's from an album. So it's sort of a hybrid song where it's like half a book song in the show and half a song off of a Gil Brantley album. And we do that at the end because it's like they're becoming more human. They're living out the experience that Gil Brantley is singing about. I mean,
Yeah, that kind of experience when you have your first like heartbreak, all of a sudden all the sad, love songs sound like your story. So that was also like what we wanted to have, sentiment-wise, like by the end of the show, now Oliver truly gets what all the Gil Brantley songs really mean. So that's why it kind of like merges with his, own story. That's what we wanted to
Yeah.
have.
And there was someone said something interesting about some other work of art, about like a character going on a journey from having something in the beginning that they see all the time but don't really understand the meaning of. But then at the end of their journey, understanding this thing that was in front of them all along. And
Right.
I think we think of it as Why Love. He's been waking up to this every morning for years, over a decade. He also talks like he knows what it means. He says like, well, as Gil Brantley says, but only at the end of the show does he actually understand the lyrics and can connect with them personally. So I think that's part of the arc. It's also why the finale is sung by Gil, James, and the retired helper bots.
Right.
You don't see them doing it, but they've joined the community at the end. So the people singing la 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 la, la, all of that is like James is there, Gil is there,
Yeah,
all the helper bots, they're sort of accompanying them.
right. The entire world. Yeah.
Yeah.